I never told my son about my $40,000 monthly salary, even though he always saw me living a simple life. One day, he invited me to dinner with his wife's parents, who were visiting from abroad. I decided to see how they would treat a poor person by pretending to be broke and naive. But the moment I stepped through the door of that restaurant, everything changed. What happened that night devastated my daughter-in-law and her family in a way they never imagined. And trust me, they deserved it. Let me tell you who I really am, because my son Marcus, at 35 years old, never knew the truth about his mother. To him, I was always just the woman who left early for the office, who came back tired in the evenings, who cooked with whatever was in the fridge. Just another employee, maybe a secretary, someone ordinary, nothing special, and I never corrected him. I never told him that I earned $40,000 every month, that I had been a senior executive at a multinational corporation for almost 20 years, signing million-dollar contracts and making decisions that affected thousands of people. Why tell him? Money was never something I needed to hang on the wall like a trophy. I grew up in an era where dignity was carried within, where silence was worth more than hollow words. So I guarded my truth. I lived in the same modest apartment for years. I used the same leather handbag until it was worn out. I bought clothes at discount chains, cooked at home, saved everything, invested everything, and became rich in silence. Because true power doesn't shout. True power observes. And I was observing closely when Marcus called me that Tuesday afternoon. His voice sounded different, nervous like when he was a kid and had done something wrong. "Mom, I need to ask you a favor. Simone's parents are visiting from overseas. It's their first time here. They want to meet you. We're having dinner on Saturday at a restaurant. Please come." Something in his tone made me uncomfortable. It wasn't the voice of a son inviting his mother. It was the voice of someone asking not to be embarrassed, to fit in, to make a good impression. "Do they know anything about me?" I asked calmly. There was a silence. Then Marcus stammered, "I told them you work in an office, that you live alone, that you're simple, that you don't have much." There it was, the word simple, as if my entire life could be contained in that miserable adjective, as if I were a problem he needed to apologize for. I took a deep breath. "Okay, Marcus, I'll be there." I hung up and looked around my living room, old but comfortable furniture, walls without expensive artwork, a small TV, nothing that would impress anyone. And at that moment, I decided. If my son thought I was a poor woman, if his wife's parents were coming ready to judge, then I would give them exactly what they expected to see. I would pretend to be broke and naive and desperate, a mother barely surviving. I wanted to feel firsthand how they treated someone who had nothing. I wanted to see their true faces, because I suspected something. I suspected Simone and her family were the type of people who measured others by their bank accounts, and my instinct never fails. Saturday arrived. I dressed in the worst outfit I owned, a light gray, shapeless, wrinkled dress, the kind they sell at a thrift store, old, worn-out shoes, no jewelry, not even a watch. I grabbed a faded canvas tote bag, pulled my hair back into a messy ponytail, and looked in the mirror. I looked like a woman broken by life. Forgettable. Perfect. I got into a taxi and gave the address, a high-end restaurant in the most exclusive part of the city, the kind where the menu doesn't list prices, where each table setting costs more than the average person's monthly salary. As we drove, I felt something strange, a mix of anticipation and sadness. Anticipation because I knew something big was coming. Sadness because a part of me still hoped I was wrong. I hoped they would treat me well, that they would be kind, that they would look past the old clothes. But the other part, the one that had worked 40 years among corporate sharks, that part knew exactly what was waiting for me. The taxi stopped in front of the restaurant, warm lights, a doorman in white gloves, elegant people entering. I paid, stepped out, took a deep breath, crossed the threshold, and there they were. Marcus was standing next to a long table near the windows. He wore a dark suit, a white shirt, and shiny shoes. He looked anxious. Beside him was Simone, my daughter-in-law. She wore a tailored cream dress with gold accents, high heels, her perfectly straight hair falling over her shoulders. She looked impeccable as always, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking towards the entrance with a tense, almost embarrassed expression. And then I saw them. Simone's parents, already seated at the table, waiting like royalty on their thrones. The mother, Veronica, wore a fitted emerald green dress full of sequins, jewels on her neck, wrists, and fingers. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant bun. She had that cold, calculated type of beauty that intimidates. Beside her was Franklin, her husband, an immaculate gray suit, a giant watch on his wrist, a serious expression. Both looked like they had stepped out of a luxury magazine. I walked toward them slowly with short steps, as if I were afraid. Marcus saw me first, and his face changed. His eyes widened. He looked me up and down. I noticed him swallow. "Mom, you came." His voice sounded uncomfortable. "Of course, son. Here I am." I smiled timidly, the smile of a woman unaccustomed to such places. Simone greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek, cold, mechanical. "Mother-in-law, it's nice to see you." Her eyes said the opposite. She introduced me to her parents in a strange, almost apologetic tone. "Dad, Mom, this is Marcus's mother." Veronica looked up, studied me, and in that instant, I saw everything. The judgment, the disdain, the disappointment. Her eyes scanned my wrinkled dress, my old shoes, my canvas tote. She didn't say anything at first, just extended a hand, cold, quick, weak. "A pleasure." Franklin did the same, a weak handshake, a false smile. Charmed. I sat down in the chair at the end of the table, the one furthest from them, as if I were a second-class guest. No one helped me pull out my chair. No one asked if I was comfortable. The waiter arrived with the elegant, heavy menus written in French. I opened mine and pretended not to understand anything. Veronica watched me. "Do you need help with the menu?" she asked with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, please. I don't know what these words mean." My voice came out small, timid. She sighed and ordered for me. "Something simple, something that doesn't cost too much. We don't want to overdo it." The phrase hung in the air. Franklin nodded. Marcus looked away. Simone played with her napkin. No one said anything, and I just watched. Veronica started talking first, about general things, the journey from abroad, how tiring the flight was, how different everything was here. Then she subtly began to talk about money. She mentioned the hotel where they were staying, $1,000 a night. She mentioned the luxury car they had rented. Obviously, she mentioned the stores they had visited. "We bought a few things, nothing major, just a few thousand." She spoke looking at me, expecting a reaction, expecting me to be impressed. I just nodded. "How nice. That's lovely." She continued. "You know, we've always been very careful with money. We worked hard. We invested well. Now we have properties in 3 countries. Franklin has major businesses, and I oversee our investments." She smiled, a smile of superiority. "And you? What exactly do you do?" Her tone was sweet but venomous. "I work in an office," I replied, lowering my gaze. "I do a little bit of everything. Paperwork, filing, simple things." Veronica nodded as if she had confirmed something. "I see. And do you earn well?" "Enough to get by," I said quietly. Franklin spoke for the first time. His voice was deep and authoritative. "In this world, just getting by is not enough. You have to aim higher. You have to want more." "I'm comfortable with what I have," I replied. He laughed, a dry, condescending laugh. "That's what poor people say to justify their lack of ambition." Before I continue with what happened next, I want to pause for just a moment. If you've ever been judged by people who thought they were better than you, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from, what city, what country. And if you've ever had to pretend to be something you're not just to see people's true colors, share that too. Your story matters to me. Now let me tell you how this dinner ended. The rest of the dinner continued in the same tone. Veronica and Franklin spoke about their luxuries while looking at me with poorly disguised pity. Marcus stayed silent. Simone tried to change the subject several times, but her parents always brought it back to money, status, and success. At one point, Veronica asked me directly, "And you, do you have savings? Investments? Something for the future?" "A little," I said vaguely, "but I don't worry too much about that." She shook her head as if I were a lost cause. "You should worry. At your age, you should have financial security. It's irresponsible not to plan ahead." Franklin added, "If you need help, we can recommend a financial advisor, someone who can teach you the basics." The condescension was unbearable, but I kept playing my role. "That's very kind of you, thank you." Dessert arrived, some fancy thing I didn't touch. Veronica and Franklin kept talking about their next trip to Europe, about their yacht, about their investments in real estate. Every sentence was designed to remind everyone at that table how rich they were and how poor I was. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. Franklin turned to Marcus and said, "Son, I hope you understand what I mean when I say you have to be careful about who you surround yourself with. People who don't have ambition can drag you down." He looked at me when he said it. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, please." "I'm just saying," Franklin continued, "that success is contagious, but so is mediocrity." That was it. That was the line. I had heard enough. I set down my napkin. I straightened in my chair. I looked Franklin directly in the eyes and said in a voice that was no longer timid, no longer small, "You're absolutely right, Franklin. Success is contagious, and so is arrogance." The table went silent. Everyone looked at me. Veronica's eyes widened. Marcus froze. Simone held her breath. Franklin frowned. "Excuse me?" I smiled, not the timid smile I had been wearing all night, but a real smile. Confident. Powerful. "You heard me. You've spent this entire dinner talking about your money, your properties, your investments. You've looked at me with pity and condescension. You've treated me like I'm some charity case. And you know what's interesting? You never once asked me about who I am, what I've accomplished, what I know. You just assumed." Veronica tried to interrupt. "I don't think—" "Let me finish," I said calmly but firmly. "You assumed that because I'm dressed simply, because I carry an old bag, because I don't wear jewelry, that I'm poor, that I'm unsuccessful, that I'm someone to be pitied. But you're wrong." I reached into my canvas bag and pulled out my phone. Not an old phone, a brand new, top-of-the-line model, the kind that costs more than most people's monthly salary. I placed it on the table. Then I pulled out my business card holder, leather, expensive. I took out a card and slid it across the table to Franklin. "My name is not just Marcus's mother. My name is Laura Morrison. I'm the Senior Vice President of Operations at Grayson International. I've been with the company for 19 years. I manage a team of 300 people across 7 countries. I negotiate contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and I earn $40,000 every single month." The silence that followed was deafening. Franklin picked up my business card. His face went white. Veronica's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Marcus stared at me in shock. Simone looked like she might faint. I continued. "I've lived in the same apartment for 15 years, not because I can't afford better, but because I don't need better. I buy my clothes at discount stores not because I'm poor, but because I don't need to prove anything to anyone. I cook at home. I save my money. I invest wisely. And do you know what I have to show for it? Financial freedom, real security, and the ability to sleep at night knowing that I don't owe anyone anything and that my worth is not determined by what I wear or what I drive. Veronica tried to recover. Well, we didn't know. Of course you didn't know, I said, because you never asked. You never cared. You just judged, and that says everything I need to know about you. Franklin's face had gone from white to red. Why would you pretend? Why would I pretend? I repeated. Because I wanted to see how you would treat someone you thought was beneath you, someone who didn't have money, someone who didn't fit your definition of success, and you failed. Spectacularly. I stood up. I came here tonight hoping I was wrong, hoping that my son had married into a family of decent people who would treat me with kindness regardless of what they thought I had or didn't have. But instead, I found exactly what I feared. People who measure worth in dollars, who look down on anyone they perceive as less than, who use their wealth as a weapon to make others feel small. I looked at Marcus. Son, I love you, but I will not sit here and be disrespected by people who think money makes them better than me. I've worked too hard and sacrificed too much to accept that. I picked up my bag. Enjoy your dinner. I'm sure it's very expensive and very, very empty. And I walked out. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Marcus. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Mom. His voice was shaking. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I knew you worked hard, but I didn't know. I never asked. I just assumed. You assumed, I said quietly, just like they did. I'm sorry, he repeated. I'm so sorry. Can we talk, please? We met at a coffee shop near my apartment. Marcus looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red. His hair was messy. We sat down, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Would it have mattered? I asked. He thought about that. It should have mattered that I never asked, that I never cared enough to know, that I just assumed you were okay and never dug deeper. Yes, I said, it should have. Simone's parents, he started, they're devastated. They can't stop talking about how embarrassed they are. Veronica called me this morning crying. Franklin sent me a long email about how they didn't mean to offend you, how they just didn't understand. Do you believe them? I asked. Marcus shook his head. I don't know. Part of me wants to, but part of me keeps remembering the way they looked at you, the way they talked to you, and I keep thinking, if you had actually been poor, would it have been okay? Would it have been fine for them to treat you that way? Exactly, I said. That's the question. We talked for 2 hours about everything, about how I had hidden my success because I didn't want him to grow up entitled, about how I had watched him build his life and his career without my financial help because I wanted him to earn it, about how I had been proud of him every single day, but had never wanted money to be what defined our relationship. Mom, he finally said, I don't know how to fix this, but I want to. I want to be better. I want to be the son you deserve. You don't need to fix anything, I said. You just need to remember that people are more than what they have. That kindness costs nothing. That respect should be given freely, not based on someone's bank account. He nodded. Simone wants to apologize to you. She's been crying for 2 days. She said she's never been so ashamed of her parents. I don't need her apology, I said. But if she wants to give it, I'll listen. 3 days later, Simone came to my apartment. She stood at my door, her eyes red from crying, her hands shaking. May I come in? She asked quietly. I let her in. We sat in my living room, the one with the old furniture and the small TV. She looked around as if seeing it for the first time. I grew up believing that money was everything, she started. My parents, they came from nothing. They built their wealth from scratch. And somewhere along the way, they started believing that having money made them better than other people. And they taught me that. They taught me to judge, to measure, to look down on anyone who didn't have what we had. She wiped her tears. I'm so sorry for how they treated you, for how I treated you. You've been nothing but kind to me, and I let them make you feel small. I let them disrespect you, and I'll never forgive myself for that. Simone, I said gently, you're not responsible for your parents' behavior, but you are responsible for yours. And if you want to change, if you want to be different, then be different. I do, she said. I want to be better. I want to raise my children, if we have children, to see people for who they are, not what they have. I want to be the kind of person who treats everyone with respect, like you do. We talked for a long time about her childhood, about the pressure she felt to maintain appearances, about how exhausting it was to constantly prove her worth through material things. I don't even know who I am without my parents' money, she admitted, without their approval, without their definition of success. Then it's time to find out, I said. Over the next few months, things changed. Marcus and Simone set boundaries with Veronica and Franklin. They told them they would be part of their lives, but only if they could be respectful, only if they could stop using money as a measure of worth. Veronica and Franklin struggled with this. They sent angry messages. They threatened to cut them off financially, but Marcus and Simone stood firm, and slowly, very slowly, Veronica and Franklin began to change. Not completely, not overnight, but enough. Enough to admit they had been wrong, enough to apologize, enough to try. The first real breakthrough came about 2 months after the restaurant incident. Veronica called me, not Marcus, not Simone, me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Laura? Her voice was different, smaller, less confident. This is Veronica. I know, I said. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Finally, she spoke. I've been thinking about that night at the restaurant. Every day, every night. I can't stop replaying it in my mind. And? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. And I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. I judged you based on your appearance. I treated you with contempt. I made you feel small because I thought you were beneath me, and I'm ashamed. I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to hear more, needed to hear more. She continued, her voice shaking now. Franklin and I, we came from nothing, real nothing. We grew up in poverty, the kind where you don't know if you'll eat that day, the kind where your clothes are held together with safety pins, the kind where people look at you like you're dirt. I didn't know that, I said quietly. No one does, because we spent our entire adult lives making sure no one would ever look at us that way again. We worked, we sacrificed, we climbed, and somewhere along the way, we became the very thing we hated. We became the people who looked down on others, who judged, who made others feel small. She was crying now. I could hear it in her voice. When you stood up that night and told us who you really were, it was like looking in a mirror, a terrible, ugly mirror, because I realized that we had become bullies, that we had spent so much time protecting ourselves from being looked down on that we started looking down on everyone else. Veronica, I said, I understand trauma. I understand survival mechanisms, but understanding doesn't excuse behavior. Your pain doesn't give you the right to inflict pain on others. I know, she whispered. I know. And I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. But I needed you to know that I see it now. I see what I became, and I'm trying to change. Are you? I asked. Really? Or are you just saying this because you're embarrassed? Both, she admitted. I won't lie to you. I'm humiliated. Franklin and I can barely show our faces in certain circles. People who were at that restaurant or heard about what happened, they look at us differently now. They whisper, they judge, and it hurts. Good, I said bluntly. Good. Yes. Good. Because now you know how it feels. Now you understand what you've been doing to other people for years. And maybe, just maybe, that will make you think twice before doing it again. There was another long silence. Then Veronica said something I didn't expect. You're right, and thank you. For what? For not letting us get away with it. For standing up. For showing us who we really were. Most people would have just sat there and taken it. But you didn't. You fought back, and you were right to do so. I softened slightly. Veronica, I don't hate you. I don't even dislike you. But I won't tolerate disrespect. Not from you, not from anyone. I understand, she said, and I promise you, if you give me a chance, I'll prove that I can be better. I'm not the one you need to prove that to, I said. Your daughter is watching. Your son-in-law is watching. Prove it to them. After that call, things began to shift. Slowly, Veronica started calling Simone more often, not to lecture, not to criticize, but to listen, to ask questions, to learn. Franklin sent Marcus an email apologizing for his condescension. It wasn't a perfect apology. It was stiff and formal, but it was a start. And most importantly, they stopped using money as a weapon. They stopped talking about their wealth. They stopped measuring everyone by their bank accounts. It wasn't easy for them. Old habits die hard, but they were trying, and I respected that. Marcus and I also grew closer. We started having dinner together once a week, just the two of us. No Simone, no in-laws, just mother and son. One evening, about 4 months after the restaurant incident, Marcus looked at me across the table and said, "Mom, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I've been angry at myself, for months now, angry that I never asked about your life, your work, your dreams. I just assumed you were okay, that you were just Mom, like that was all you were supposed to be." "Marcus, no, let me finish. I took you for granted. I let Simone's parents disrespect you because I was too worried about making a good impression. I should have defended you. I should have stood up for you, and I didn't, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life." I reached across the table and took his hand. "Son, you're learning. That's what matters. You made a mistake. You recognized it. You're trying to do better. That's all anyone can ask. But you deserved better. You've always deserved better." "Maybe," I said, "but I also chose to hide my success. I chose to live simply. I chose not to tell you about my career, so I played a part in this too." "Why did you hide it?" he asked. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I thought about that question for a long time before answering, because I wanted you to see me as a person, not as a paycheck, not as a safety net, not as someone who could solve all your problems with money. I wanted you to build your own life, make your own way, succeed because of your own hard work, not because your mother had money. "Did it work?" he asked. "Look at yourself," I said. "You have a good job. You've built a career. You're independent. You don't rely on me financially. So yes, I think it worked." "But it also meant I never really knew you," he said sadly. "I knew Mom. I didn't know Lara." "Well," I smiled, "now you do. And now we can build a relationship based on truth, on who we really are, not who we pretended to be." Marcus smiled back. "I'd like that." We spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, about my career, about the challenges I'd faced as a woman in a male-dominated industry, about the deals I'd closed, the countries I'd traveled to, the people I'd managed. And he listened, really listened. For the first time, my son saw me not just as his mother, but as a whole person, someone with accomplishments and dreams and struggles that had nothing to do with him. It was liberating, for both of us. Simone also changed. She started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping women who were trying to escape poverty and build new lives. She told me once, "I want to be the person who sees them, who treats them with dignity, who gives them a chance, the way you deserve to be treated that night." She cut back on her shopping. She stopped posting on social media about every luxury purchase. She started asking herself before buying anything, do I need this? Or am I just buying it to impress people who don't really care about me? It was a transformation I never expected. And it made me hopeful that the next generation could be different, could be better. One Sunday afternoon, about 6 months after everything happened, we all had lunch together. Me, Marcus, Simone, Veronica, and Franklin, at my apartment. I cooked. Something simple. Pasta, salad, garlic bread. Nothing fancy. Nothing expensive. Veronica and Franklin arrived with flowers. Not roses or orchids, just simple daisies from the market. For you, Veronica said, handing them to me, to say thank you for having us. We sat around my small dining table, the one that's slightly wobbly, and we ate and we talked. Not about money, not about properties or investments or luxury cars. We talked about books, about movies, about the weather, about nothing and everything. At one point, Franklin looked around my apartment and said, "You know, Lara, this place is really nice, cozy. It feels like a home." "Thank you," I said. "It is home. It's all I need." Veronica added, "I used to think that more was always better. Bigger house, fancier car, more expensive everything. But sitting here now, I realize that's not true. Sometimes less is actually more." "It took you long enough to figure that out," I said with a slight smile. She laughed, a real laugh. "Better late than never?" "Better late than never," I agreed. After they left, Marcus stayed behind to help me clean up. As we washed dishes together, he said, "Thank you, Mom." "For what?" "For giving them a chance, for not holding a grudge, for being the bigger person." I dried my hands and looked at him. "Marcus, I'm not being the bigger person. I'm just being myself. And part of being myself means giving people room to grow, room to change, room to be better than they were." "But what if they hadn't changed?" he asked. "What if they'd stayed the same?" "Then they would have lost access to our lives," I said simply. "I would have been kind but distant, polite but unavailable, because I refuse to be around people who disrespect me, but they did change, or at least they're trying to, and that deserves recognition." As for me, I went back to my quiet life, my simple apartment, my old handbag, my discount store clothes. But now Marcus knew the truth. Simone knew the truth, and Veronica and Franklin had learned a valuable lesson. I continued working, closing deals, managing teams, leading meetings. But I also started mentoring young women in the company, women who were ambitious but didn't know how to navigate corporate politics, women who were talented but lacked confidence, women who needed someone to believe in them the way I wish someone had believed in me when I was starting out. One of my mentees, a young woman named Jessica, asked me once, "How did you do it? How did you succeed in a world that constantly underestimated you?" I thought about that question, about all the times I'd been overlooked, dismissed, underestimated, about all the times people saw my quiet demeanor and simple clothes and assumed I had nothing to offer. "I did it by knowing my worth," I told her, "by not needing external validation, by understanding that my value doesn't come from what other people think of me. It comes from what I think of me, and I think pretty highly of myself." She smiled. "I want to be like you when I grow up." "You already are," I said. "You just don't know it yet." Last month, Marcus and Simone told me they're expecting a baby, a little girl. They asked me what name I thought they should choose. I suggested they pick something meaningful to them, something that represented the values they wanted to instill in their daughter. They decided on Grace. "Because," Simone said, "we want her to have grace, to give it and to receive it, to treat people with kindness, regardless of what they have, to be strong but gentle, to be successful but humble, to be exactly like her grandmother." I cried when she said that. Happy tears, proud tears, because in the end, that's what it was all about. Not the money I earned, not the titles I held, not the success I achieved, but the legacy I left, the values I passed down, the lessons I taught, and those lessons were simple. Be kind, be humble, don't judge, don't measure people by what they have. See them for who they are, treat them with dignity, and never ever let anyone make you feel small. I think about that night at the restaurant sometimes, about the look on Veronica's face when I revealed who I really was, about Franklin's shock, about Marcus's confusion, about Simone's shame, and I realized that everything happened exactly as it needed to. If I had told them the truth from the beginning, they never would have shown me who they really were. They would have been polite, respectful, kind, but it would have been fake, performance, an act. By pretending to be poor, I gave them permission to take off their masks, to show me their true selves. And what I saw wasn't pretty, but it was honest. And sometimes honesty is more valuable than politeness. Sometimes seeing the truth, even when it's ugly, is better than living with a beautiful lie. That night taught me something important. It taught me that I was right to live the way I lived, to hide my wealth, to stay humble, to remain grounded. Because wealth changes people. It corrupts them. It makes them believe they're better than others. It gives them permission to look down, to judge, to exclude. And I never wanted to become that person. I never wanted to be someone who measured human worth in dollars and cents. I wanted to stay connected to reality, to remember where I came from, to understand that money is a tool, not an identity, and I think I succeeded. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to raise a son who, despite his mistakes, learned to see past appearances. Enough to influence a daughter-in-law who chose growth over comfort. Enough to even reach two people who seemed unreachable, who seemed too set in their ways to ever change. Veronica called me last week just to talk. No agenda, no apology, just to check in. She told me about a woman she met at the grocery store who was struggling to pay for her food. Instead of looking away, instead of judging, Veronica paid for her groceries. "I thought of you," she told me. "I thought about how you would have handled it, and I tried to be more like you." That's when I knew, really knew, that the lesson had taken root, that change was possible, that people could grow if given the chance and the motivation. Looking back now, I wouldn't change a thing. Not the pretending, not the confrontation, not the difficult conversations that followed, because all of it led to this, to a family that's more honest, more connected, more real, to relationships built on truth rather than assumption, to a future where my granddaughter will grow up knowing that her worth has nothing to do with what she owns and everything to do with who she becomes. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you've ever been underestimated because of how you look or what you have, share your story. If you've ever had to stand up to people who thought they were better than you, I want to hear about it. If you've ever pretended to be less than you were just to see how people would treat you, tell me what happened. Because we all have more in common than we think. And sometimes, the quietest people are the most powerful. Sometimes the ones who have the most say the least. And sometimes, the greatest lesson you can teach is simply by being exactly who you are, unapologetically and completely. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And remember, your worth is not determined by your bank account. It's determined by your character. And that's something no one can ever take away from you.